He hit me. Not for the first time, but this time, he left it where everyone could see. A purple mark bloomed just below my eye like an accusation, and when my mother arrived, called by me, quietly, not urgently, she saw it. She stared for a moment too long, then looked away. Marriage isn't perfect, Tara, she whispered, like that would settle it. And just like that, I stopped hoping she would speak for me. That night, I sat by myself in the kitchen. The candle on the counter flickered like it was breathing. And while he snored in the next room, reeking of wine and arrogance, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I made tea. And I made a decision. Because 30 minutes later, when he woke up and stumbled toward me, ready to pretend again, I wasn't the one who bowed. The first time Elliot raised his voice at me, it wasn't loud. That's what I remember most. It wasn't rage. It was control. He had just gotten off the phone with his sister. She was upset because he wouldn't sign her new car loan, and I, foolishly, suggested he should. Hey, she's your only family, I said gently. He turned, wine glass still in hand, and looked at me like I'd spilled something expensive on the floor. You don't tell me how to handle my family, he said flatly. I remember blinking, unsure why my throat felt tight. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't even insisted, but something shifted in the room that night. The space between us grew sharper. Over the months, those shifts became patterns. His sarcasm carved into me slowly, never loud, never overt. He didn't throw punches. He threw silence, distance, and passive dismissal. I'd say something kind, he'd ignore it. I'd reach out, he'd recoil. And still, I stayed, because Elliot wasn't all sharp edges. He could be charming when he wanted to be, especially in front of others. He made the waiters laugh, my colleagues respect him, and my mother adores him. But behind closed doors, his charm dissolved like aspirin in water. It left a bitter aftertaste, and I learned to sip around it. The first time he hit me wasn't with his hand. It was with a book. A heavy law text. He was angry. I'd misplaced it. I hadn't, but by the time I explained, the corner had already grazed my collarbone. I didn't throw it at you, he said. I just threw it. You happened to be there. I nodded. Of course, I happened to be there. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my co-resident, not even Rachel, though she noticed I stopped wearing V-necks for a while. That's the thing about being hurt in small ways. You start rationing the truth like it's your fault someone else is careless with it. Elliot always had an excuse. I had a rough day. You misunderstood me. Why do you always have to make things difficult? And then came the night that cracked everything open. I'd spent 12 hours in the ER. A girl had come in, maybe 19, with a fractured wrist and tears she pretended were from the cold. I patched her up gently. Asked who she lived with. She hesitated. Said, my boyfriend's usually not like this. I looked at her, really looked. She was me, just earlier. The kind of woman who still made excuses for bruises that had patterns. When I came home that night, I hugged Elliot. He barely looked up from his laptop. And when I mentioned I wanted to volunteer at the women's clinic, he smirked. You think rescuing charity cases makes you a saint? I froze. Not because he disagreed, but because of what I saw flicker across his face, the same look that patient had described. Cold, dismissive, dangerous. That night, when I leaned down to pick up his charger, he, accidentally, bumped his knee into my eye. He didn't even say sorry. He just looked annoyed that I dropped the charger. And that was when I knew he'd stopped pretending to be careful. After that night, I stopped looking at him the same way. Not because I stopped loving him. I wish it had been that simple. But because my body had started learning what my heart wasn't ready to admit. I flinched before he even moved. My breath caught when his keys jangled. I counted the seconds between his silence and his sighs. Fear doesn't always arrive with a scream. Sometimes, it settles in slowly, like damp under wallpaper. You only notice when the whole room starts to smell like rot. The bruise beneath my eye bloomed like a warning. When I showed up to brunch with my mother the next day, she stared at me for a moment too long. That from the hospital? She asked, nodding toward my face. I didn't answer. She didn't ask again. Instead, she clucked her tongue and said, you need to get more sleep. That residency's aging you. Then she launched into a story about Aunt Lucille's new curtains. I stirred my coffee and said nothing. It wasn't cowardice. It was a test. And she failed. By the time I came home that evening, Elliot was watching a game, beer in hand, bare feet on the coffee table I'd paid for. He didn't look up when I entered. Do you want dinner? I asked, already knowing the answer. He shrugged. Whatever. And just like that, the wall between us thickened by another inch. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, staring at the groceries I'd bought with my tips from weekend shifts. He didn't offer to help. He didn't ask how my day was. But when dinner was late by 7 minutes, he barked, did you forget how clocks work? That was the night I started writing things down. Not because I had a plan, but because I needed to remember what was real. I needed to see it on paper. His words, my silence, the way the house changed temperature when he entered the room. I hid the notebook under the sink behind the bleach. He never cleaned. He wouldn't find it. Rachel started noticing. She was my co-resident, and for months, she'd watched me fade. You haven't laughed in 6 weeks, she said once, handing me a granola bar on a night shift. I counted. I wanted to tell her. God, I almost told her. But I still hadn't said the words out loud, even to myself. I was still trying to be the good wife, the loyal daughter, the woman who could endure without complaining. That's what my mother had always taught me anyway. That woman who survived didn't make scenes, they made beds. They made dinner. They made peace. But there's a cost to that kind of peace, and I was starting to feel it in my bones. Late one evening, I sat on the bathroom floor, back against the tub, holding my toothbrush like it was a weapon. Elliot had yelled for 30 minutes, because I forgot to pick up his dry cleaning. I kept waiting for the door to swing open. It didn't. He went to bed. Just like that. No apology. No reconciliation. No effort. And somehow, that hurt more than the yelling, because it meant he didn't see me anymore, not even as something to break. I'd become furniture, background, a fixture in his curated life. I stayed on the floor for over an hour. Eventually, I stood, looked in the mirror, and whispered, "This is not the end." I didn't know what the next chapter would be yet, but something in me had begun to turn. Slowly, quietly, like the tide before the wave. She came in on a Tuesday night. Quiet, small, and trying not to cry, though her knuckles were already telling the story. Dislocated middle finger. Hairline fracture in the wrist. She said she fell. They always say that at first. I examined her carefully. I asked if she'd like someone from social work to speak with her. She shook her head. Then she said something that stopped me mid-note. He's not always like this. That sentence had lived in my own throat for years. I looked up. She was maybe 20, pale. Hair tied back too tight, like she was trying to hold herself together. Her eyes flickered across the room like she was tracking shadows. "Does he know you're here?" I asked softly. She hesitated. Then, "No. He thinks I'm at a friend's." I handed her an ice pack. We sat in silence for a moment while I typed up her chart. Then she said, "Hey always says sorry. He gets mad sometimes. That's not the real him." And I almost said it out loud. The thing I hadn't even dared whisper to Rachel. But instead, I looked at her and offered a truth I hadn't given myself yet. That part of him is real too. She blinked, and for a split second, her whole face cracked, not from pain, but from recognition. She didn't need advice. She needed to know she wasn't crazy. That the fear wasn't weakness. That staying didn't make her stupid, and leaving didn't make her a villain. We wrapped her wrist. I gave her a number she didn't ask for and a card she wouldn't take. But as she was leaving, she paused. "Your eye," she said. I froze. She pointed gently to my cheekbone. The swelling had gone down, but the discoloration remained. I hadn't even remembered it that morning. I hope you get out too," she whispered. Then she was gone. I stood in that hallway long after her footsteps faded. I pressed my fingers to the fading bruise. Not to check it, but to remind myself it was real, that I wasn't imagining this life I was living, that I wasn't ungrateful or dramatic, that it was happening. And that stranger, she saw me. More clearly than my own mother. That night, I couldn't sleep. Elliot was out late, networking or drinking or both. I lay on the couch in the dark, scrolling through old photos of our wedding. God, we looked beautiful. The kind of couple people envy on Instagram. But I remembered what happened the morning those photos were taken. He'd yelled because the hotel messed up his cufflinks. He slammed the bathroom door so hard the mirror cracked. He didn't say sorry. He just said, "Don't make a scene today." And I hadn't. I made a vow. I smiled in photos. I let him slide the ring onto my trembling hand. The next morning, I looked up that patient's address. Just to be sure she got home. She hadn't checked back in. No police report. No follow-up. But 2 days later, a delivery came to the hospital addressed to me. A small envelope. No return name. Inside was a thank you note. No signature. "Thank you for not looking away. That saved me more than you know." I held the card like it might disappear. Because that's what truth often feels like when you've gone too long without it. Fragile. That was the moment it clicked. I hadn't stayed all this time because I was afraid of Elliot. I'd stayed because I didn't think anyone else would believe me. Because every time I'd tried to speak, someone had turned away, and silence became safer. But now, someone had seen me. Someone I was supposed to be saving had unknowingly started saving me, and I wasn't ready to move yet. But I was no longer standing still. 3 days later, he accused me of cheating, not quietly, not with any evidence. Just venom spat across the dining room table because I laughed, too long, apparently, at a text Rachel sent me. "I saw the way you looked at your phone." Elliot snapped, his fork clattering onto his plate. I blinked. "What are you talking about? You think I'm stupid?" I stared at the man across from me. The same man who used to bring me soup when I had migraines. Now he looked at me like I was the enemy, and maybe I was, because I had started thinking, documenting, believing. Who is he? He pressed, standing now, his voice rising. Who the hell have you been texting every night at the hospital? It's Rachel, I said, evenly. You've met her. She's gay, Elliot. He paused. A second of doubt. Then he shoved the chair backward so hard it hit the wall. I don't care what she is. You're lying. I can smell it on you. That was the night he grabbed my arm. Tight at first, then tighter. His nails dug in, and I felt the ligaments strain. Let go of me, I said. He didn't. Not until I twisted away and hit the corner of the hallway wall with my shoulder. A loud crack. Then darkness. I don't remember falling, but I remember waking up on the kitchen floor. The tiles were cold. My vision swam, and Elliot, he was gone. When I managed to sit up, my left shoulder screamed. It wasn't broken, but it was bad. I could feel the wrongness beneath the skin. Like something had shifted out of place and decided it liked it there. I didn't go to the hospital. I wrapped it myself, silently, and called in sick the next day. Rachel dropped off soup at my door, but I didn't let her in. I wasn't ready to speak it aloud. Not yet. My mother called that afternoon. She said she missed me. Said, marriage is full of growing pains, Tara. Your father and I, well, we had our years too. I wanted to ask, did Dad ever accuse you of sleeping with a woman just because you laughed? Did he ever twist your arm so hard you saw spots? But I didn't. I said, I'm fine. And she said, that's my girl. That night, I stared at Elliot as he slept. His chest rising and falling like nothing had ever happened. Like, I didn't have bruises blooming beneath my shirt and a shoulder that throbbed with every breath. And then I thought of her again. The patient. The stranger with kind eyes and a split lip who said, I hope you get out too. She didn't know how much she'd undone me. How much she'd cracked through the narrative I'd built to survive. I'd told myself I was staying for peace. That I could fix this. That I was strong. But strength isn't the same as endurance. Endurance is what you do to survive pain. Strength is when you decide not to live in it. So I made another decision. This time, I didn't write it in a notebook. I didn't whisper it to a mirror. I said it aloud, just once, in the darkness of our bedroom. I'm not going to wait until you kill me to call it what it is. And then I slept. Not well, not deeply. But without dreaming. That alone was enough. The next morning, I texted Rachel. I'm ready to talk, but not about me. She replied in less than a minute. Come by after 8. Bring whatever you have. Or don't. I'll be here either way. I pulled out the envelope I'd saved for months. Receipts, financial statements, and screenshots of Elliot's private transfers from our shared account to something called Winton Games. Online poker. I never knew he gambled. But that wasn't what made me pause. It was the transfer tagged, KLS Trust Fund. The name meant nothing to me, until I remembered the patient's initials, Kayla L. Simmons, the hairline fracture, the silent thanks, the absence of a follow-up report. She hadn't just disappeared. He had paid her, or worse, he used my money to do it. My blood turned cold. I copied everything into a folder, labeled it, maybes. I didn't know yet what it meant. But I knew this, he wasn't just dangerous to me. And that changed everything. Rachel didn't ask questions when I showed up at her apartment with a folder clutched in my hands like it was a child I was afraid to drop. She just opened the door wider and said, tea or whiskey? I answered, both. We sat in her living room, cross-legged like we were in college again, surrounded by soft lamps and the kind of quiet that makes space for confessions. I laid out the folder, receipts, screenshots, my bruises, documented in progression, like a slow, burning fire mapping its way across my skin. She didn't gasp. She didn't interrupt, she just listened. When I told her about Kayla, about the trust fund transfer, and the silence that followed, Rachel leaned forward, the air around us sharpening. You think he paid her off? I nodded slowly. With my money. And if he did worse? I need to know. Rachel's eyes didn't flinch. I'll help. That's when the work began. Not the kind that leaves you breathless, but the kind that steadies your hands. We traced Elliot's accounts. Rachel, being Rachel, knew how to find things she technically wasn't supposed to find. Old case lookups, discarded subpoenas, settlements. He'd done it before. Different girl, different city, same playbook. He got angry, she got scared. Money appeared, she vanished. But this time he left a thread loose, and I pulled. That night, I emailed Kayla. It was a shot in the dark, a guess. But I wrote, you don't know me well, but I think we've both known him better than we wanted to. I'm not asking you to relive anything. I'm just asking, if you were still afraid, would you want to know you're not alone? She didn't answer that night. But the next morning, I woke to a single reply. He told me no one would believe me. Maybe it's time he finds out he was wrong. I dropped the phone. Not in fear, in release. Like I'd finally exhaled something I'd been holding for months. Rachel helped me build the report. Not for the police, at least not yet. But for me, I compiled every piece of documentation I'd gathered. My words. Kayla's timeline. Rachel added notes, statements, and images. We labeled it Case 0. I carried that folder around for 3 days. To work, to bed, even to the grocery store. I wasn't ready to use it, but I was ready to know I had it. Then, Elliot slipped. Not in violence, but in panic. He found the credit card bill with the burner phone I'd purchased. He confronted me in the kitchen. What the hell is this? I didn't answer. He waved the receipt like it was evidence. Who are you calling? Who's tracking me? Are you recording me? That was the moment I realized he wasn't just angry anymore. He was scared. I tilted my head. Why would I record you? His eyes narrowed. Don't play dumb. I smiled. Then don't act innocent. He slammed his fist on the counter. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. That night, I packed a duffel. Just a small one. Not for running, but for repositioning. Then I asked him to dinner. He raised an eyebrow. Are you cooking? No, I said, brushing my hair back. I made reservations. It wasn't kindness. It was choreography. I knew what I was doing. The restaurant was across from the police substation. Our table had a direct view. He didn't notice. He was too busy smirking. Too busy thinking he was back in control. I knew you'd come around, he said, slicing his steak. You just needed time to stop being dramatic. I sipped my water, smiled, watched the reflection of a black car pull up outside. 3 plainclothes officers stepped out. Kayla had filed a sworn statement that morning, and I had submitted Case 0 under both our names. Elliot was mid-sentence when the first badge appeared beside the table. Mr. Mercer. He turned confused. Yeah. We'd like you to come with us. Now, he blinked. This is a mistake. But I was already standing. He looked at me. Eyes wide, mouth open. You set me up. No, I said calmly. You set yourself up. I just gave them the map. They cuffed him, quietly, efficiently, and as he passed me, writhing in disbelief, I said it so only he could hear. You told me no one would believe me. Now watch how many do. The next morning, the world didn't stop. Birds still argued outside my window. The neighbor's kid still slammed the front door. My tea still tasted like burnt lemon peel. But Elliot was gone. For the first time in years, the space beside me was just space. Not tension, not obligation, not fear dressed up as comfort. I got a call at noon. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. It was his mother. I hadn't heard her voice since the wedding. Tara, she said, clipped and breathless. I don't know what happened, but Elliot's being held at the station. He says you've misunderstood, that you've always been dramatic. I didn't respond. She continued. Look, whatever's going on between you two, let's not ruin his life over it. He's worked so hard, and your parents, they told me you've been struggling. Ah. So they talked, so they decided. I inhaled, then said, with the same calm I used when delivering test results, no one's ruining his life. He did that on his own. I just stopped covering for it. Then I hung up. I didn't owe her more. That evening, Rachel came over. She brought pad thai and paper plates. We didn't talk about him. We talked about plants, about how we both accidentally kill succulents, about maybe getting a dog or a ridiculously fat cat. We didn't talk about Kayla either, but her name hung in the air like a shared prayer. That night, I slept for 8 straight hours. No flinching. No checking the locks twice. No dreams. Just rest. The following week, I went to the station for the official statement. The detective, Samuels, was young, but he looked like he'd read every word of my file twice. He didn't question my tone. He didn't need tears to believe me. After I signed the paperwork, he asked, would you be willing to testify? I said yes without pausing. It wasn't about punishment. It was about pattern. About making sure no one else learned how to rationalize pain by watching me pretend it didn't exist. Outside, a breeze lifted the edge of my jacket. Across the street, a busker sang something about freedom, his guitar case open, half empty. I dropped in a 5, even though the song was off key, because it still felt honest. 2 days later, Elliot's lawyer requested a meeting. I said no, then said yes. I wanted it on my terms. They scheduled a mediation room at the courthouse. He arrived wearing the same navy blazer he wore to our engagement party. Hair neatly combed. No cuffs now. No smirk either. He looked small, like someone whose voice had been turned down to its real volume. I sat across from him. He opened with the line I expected. You don't know what you're doing to me. I let the silence respond. Then came the desperate pivot. We had good times, Tara. You're not perfect either. Remember the lake house. Remember Italy. I loved you. I met his eyes for the first time. Then why did you break me? His lips parted. No words came. He dropped to his knees. There, on the courthouse tile. A show. A breakdown. A plea. It didn't matter. Because I didn't need it. I stood. You're kneeling like I'm your savior. I said quietly. But I'm just the mirror. He looked up, startled. I continued, this is who you are. You made that choice. Now live with it. Then I walked out. The wind outside smelled like rain. Like something clean after rot. That night I wrote a letter. Not to him, not to the judge, not to his family. But to me. I started it the way I wish someone had spoken to me years ago. You don't need to justify leaving pain. You don't need to prove how much it hurt. You only need to believe that staying quiet never protected you. And leaving doesn't make you cruel. It makes you free. I folded the paper. Slid it into the back of my journal. In the same journal, I once wrote, I exist. I lit a candle on the windowsill. Not for grief. Not for him. But for the woman who finally walked out. Not for safety. Not for revenge. But for herself. The flame flickered, small but steady. Just enough light to be seen from the street. And as I stood there, barefoot, hand warm from the ceramic cup of tea, I whispered, you can kneel if you want. But I'm already standing.